Are we online? Ready to go? Yes, good. There are a lot of people actually in this room. You see only me, but they are doing the direction and they are looking if everything is going right. We have a lot of PCs. This is the first time for us, so I hope that everything will work fine. And there is, Guillaume warming up in the behind the scene here. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I am Enrico Signoretti, and I am the head of product strategy here at OpenIO. But today I'm just the dumb guy, so I will ask the dumb questions to our head of pre-sales and co-founder, Guillaume Delaporte, that is joining us. Guillaume?
Yes. Hi everybody.
So without any further ado, I leave to Guillaume the microphone.
Okay, thanks Enrico.
Here you go.
Okay, thanks a lot. So, the people I usually met always ask me a good question, that is how OpenIO is working, inside I mean, because you know that we are an S3 compatible solution, also we have a file system connector, but how it works really internally. And there is nothing better than a whiteboard session to explain how works OpenIO. So what I will do today is to explain the OYO SDS part, so the core product of OpenIO. I will not explain too much our connectors like the file system connector, how we work with email solution and so on, backup solution. So really the core solution. So to do that, I will just grab this one. Thank you, Enrico. And so we'll start. So I will make it. It's quite easy. I will just explain the architecture of OpenIO and do a kind of workflow. So what is happening inside the solution when I put a data, when I read the data, and when I delete the data. And I will explain all the concept of the OpenIO SDS solution. So let's start by someone who is doing so. For this session, I will explain three different use cases. So when you get using S3 APIs, you get an object. So let's say that you will get it from bucket 1 and the object 1. So we will get this data. So we'll take for granted that this data is already stored for the first part, and I will explain how it works when you get the data. Then I will explain how I can put a new data inside OpenIO using S3 API, again using the bucket 1 still, but this time I will put the object 2, and this will be a new object. And finally I will explain how it works when you want to put a new bucket, let's say the bucket 2. And finally, if I have the time, I will explain what will happen when I delete the data.
Bucket 2.
The bucket 2, sorry. Okay, so let's start with the OpenIO architecture. So we will start with our S3 gateway, which is also a Swift compliant gateway, so Swift and S3. And as you may know or not, we have one of our APIs embedded inside this Swift gateway, which is our Python API. We have also the Java API, the C API, but for this Swift and S3 gateway, it will be our Python API. And we have here, with this gateway, what we call our OYO proxy. Then, internally, I mean inside OpenIO, you know that we have a 3 level of indirection inside OpenIO. I mean that when you want to retrieve a data, you have 3 hops to make to get the data. So the first level of indirection is the meta 0. So we have a couple of them. Then the second level of indirection is the meta 1. And we have a couple of them. The number of services here really depends on the size of your infrastructure. And then, obviously, the third level of indirection is the meta2. And we have a couple of them. And finally, this is the 3 level of indirection, we have where we store the data, let's say the blob store, and we are calling them the ROX services, ROX. And you have, if you have a huge infrastructure, you have a lot of them. ROX. So this is really a logical view of OpenIO. All these services are spread across all the nodes, but here really for this session it will be a logical view. So let's go with the first step. When someone wants to get the object 1 inside the bucket 1 using the S3 APIs, and let's say that the data is already stored inside the OpenIO architecture. So what will happen here is that we will go and using the S3 API you will go to do the get of bucket 1, object 1. First thing here with the Python API, the bucket 1 will be hash coded, the name bucket 1 will be hash coded using SHA 256. So the name of bucket 1 will become something like A0, B2, C3, and much more. So we will have this name. The first request that will be made is that using the Python API, it will ask to the IO proxy, and the IO proxy will manage this request in the indirection table. So it will go in one of the meta 0, say, okay, I am a bucket, and my name starts by, so you will have a table here in one of the meta 0, in one of the meta 0, with okay, if your name here starts by A0B, I hope that on YouTube it's clear enough. You have, because our solution is a non-spot solution, so you have multiple ways to access to the data. Let's say that this time, this level of indirection will be repeated 3 times. It's a configuration, so you can change it. You can say 5 times, but let's say that this will be repeated 3 times. So you will have here 3 IP port, 3 possibility, 1, 2, and 3, and it will be some meta 1 services. So you will have 3 possibilities to go to the meta 1. So the meta 0 will answer to the IO proxy, okay, you have 3 possibilities, these 3, to go to the next level, the meta 1. Here the IO proxy will go then to the meta 1, so it will go to one of the meta 1 services, let's say this one, and here again you have a table with, okay, my name is this time the complete name, so my name is A0, B2, C3, and so on. And you will have here, again, let's say that we are in a 3-time replication mode, 3 different IP ports to access to the next level, the meta 2. So then the meta 1 will answer to the IO proxy saying, okay, if you want to have the information about where the object 1 is stored for the bucket 1, you have to go to this meta 2, this one, or this one. So the IO proxy will go to one of the meta 2 listed here and say, okay, and this time we have a dedicated table for this container, the bucket 1 hash coded with A0, B2, C3. So we have here a dedicated table for that, A0, B2, C3, and so on, with here the information about the object. So we'll have an entry here with object 1, and here you will see, let's say again that we are in a 3-time replication for the data as well. We were talking about the table of indirection, but here for the data, let's say that we are in a 3-time replication, so we will have 3 copies of our data. Of course, if you are using erasure coding like 6+3 erasure coding scheme, you will have like 9 entries, but just to make something easier, let's say that we are in a 3-time replication. So here again, you will have 3 different IP ports to get the object one, and it's IP port of some ROIC services from the infrastructure. So again, the Meta 2 will answer to the proxy. Okay, if you want to get your data, the object one, you have 3 different possibilities to do that. Again, if you are in a erasure coding scheme, you will have more possibilities to get the data. But if you are in a terminal application, you have 3 different possibilities to get the data. So the Python API will retrieve this information, and then let's say that our data is stored in these ROIC services. So somewhere here we have our object one, I mean the file stored here, stored in one disk where the ROIC services is working, and the Python API will get the data. So we have 3 different possibilities, so it could be this one or other ROIC services, and the data will come back here, and finally you get your data. So this is how it works when you want to get a data that is already available inside the OpenIO architecture. No question at this stage?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Maybe because my explanation is very clear. And
yes, of course.
Of course. Okay, so let's say that now we will put a new object, the object 2, and the object 2 is not yet stored inside OpenIO. So we will discover a new services inside the OpenIO infrastructure, the well-known conscience here. The conscience. So how are the conscience? The conscience is our services that is gathering some information for all the services, all the nodes and all the disks inside the platform. Information like capacity, like I/O, CPU, RAM, and so on. Some metrics inside for each services and each node, each disk of the platform. And then the conscience will take all this information, compute a score for every services of the platform, between 0, which is the lowest score, and 100, which is the best score. And the conscience, based on this matrix, will compute a score, quality score, for every services of the platform. How the conscience will do that? You have one conscience agent in each node of the platform. So let's say that you have a conscience agent here. So I will put CSC agent. And this conscience agent will get information about the services started on this specific node. So for the Meta 1, the Meta 2 on this node, maybe this ROIC is on the same node, so it will take all the information, all the metrics, and then going through the IO proxy, we'll say to the conscience, okay, this Meta 1, this Meta 2 is using like 1 gig of RAM, has only 50% space left, information like that, and the conscience will compute score, saying, okay, this specific Meta 1 has a score of, so you will have a kind of picture of the platform. This Meta 1 has a score of 60, for example. And then so the conscience will collect all the information from all the services and all the nodes of the platform, compute this score, and then give back this score to all the services of the platform. So all the services in the platform will have a view of the view from the conscience.
Okay, there is a question coming from YouTube. In this case of large objects, is each chunk fetched separately on the 3 metas, or one meta level is responsible for the split metadata of this object?
So the question is, if I have, for example, a large file like 1 gig, what we will do inside the OpenIO platform. So I go back with the green pen. So we have a configuration inside OpenIO that we call the maximum chunk size. So let's say that we configure it with 100 megabyte, and you have a 1 gigabyte file. Again, it's configuration, so you can modify it, but let's start with this information. So you will have, at the end, for the object 1, if it's a 1 gigabyte file, you will have 10 chunk of data. We will chunk the data in 10 pieces, 10 times 100 megabyte. And you will have here, for the object 1, the three possibilities for the position 0, the three possibilities for the position 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And when you will get the data, here the meta2 will answer, okay, if you want to get this specific file, you have to take 10 pieces, 10 chunks, and the Python API will, with the position of the chunk, will get the 10 pieces and then like concatenate the data to have the complete data. So this is how it will works. We will chunk the data in small pieces. I hope that I answered to this question. If not, feel free to ask more. Okay, so this is how it works. So let's go back to the constraints. So every services of platform will have the information about all the other services and their score and somehow the quality and how they are available, if they are fully available or if they are storing already, for example, a lot of data, so they are not the best one to choose. So let's go again. So I want to put a new object in the bucket 1. So this is this request using S3. I didn't mention it first, but the Oyo proxy is not only to make the resolution of our table of indirection, but it's also a cache for this table of indirection. So if I want to put a new object in the bucket 1, I mean, just after reading the object 1, if I want to put a new object in the same bucket, the information here will be cached. So what will happen here is that when I will do a put, if you didn't access to this bucket for a long time, you will do meta 0, meta 1, meta 2. But if you did a request not so long time ago, the information will be cached, so we will not go again to meta 0 and meta 1, we'll go directly to the meta 2 because information about, okay, where is the meta 2 for this bucket is already stored here. I mean, it's already cached. So we'll go there, so we'll do a request to the meta 2, so you have again 3 meta 2. We are in a 3-time replication mode, so we'll go to one of them, and by saying, okay, I want to put a new object, the object 2, and the meta 2 will answer, okay, if you want to put a new object, you need ROIC services to store your data. So the meta 2 will answer with a list of available ROICs to store your data, and this is where the conscience will do the job. I mean, the meta 2 will give back a list of available ROICs, but the meta 2, based on the conscience and the score that the conscience gave to the meta 2 will choose the 3, again we are in a 3-time replication mode, the 3 best ROICs of the platform to store the data, based on the quality score. In fact, the meta 2 will give, if we are in a 3-time replication mode, probably 5 ROICs services because it's a kind of spare ROICs. In case you want to put your data somewhere and it fails, you will have other ROICs to retry your request. So, again, 3-time replication mode, so we'll have 3 different ROICs services to store the data. So let's say that we will put it here on this one and on this one. Let's say that they have the best score and this one. So this, let's say that they have the best score of the platform. This one is has a 90 score. This one, let's say 95, and this one 85. And let's say that this one has like a 70 score. So for the meta 2, the 3 best ROICs services of the platform are this one, this one, and this one. So the Python API will put the data here, here, and here, the 3 copies of the data, and then if the Python APIs gets a correct answer, I mean that if you didn't have any failure during when you stored your data, the Oyo proxy will go back here to the meta 2 saying, okay, I have put a new object, the object 2, and here is where I have stored my 3 copies of the data, here, here, and here. So again, the IP port of the 3 services where the data has been stored. And then, finally, the YoYo proxy say, okay, the data is stored, and you get 200 return code because data is well stored. One thing I didn't mention here is that, as I explained, this specific Meta2 database is replicated 3 times. So we have a new service. Let me add a new service that we call the Zookeeper. It's a pretty well-known open source tool, Zookeeper. And what is doing the Zookeeper is your 3 Meta2 involved for this specific bucket will ask to the Zookeeper who is the master. So you have 1 master and 2 slaves for this specific database. So when I put the data here, let's say that this one was the master. If I went to a slave Meta2 by saying, okay, I want to write in data, this Meta2 will have say, okay, I'm not the master is this one, so it will have a read effect. Anyway, let's say that this one was the master, so when the Python API through the YoYo proxy say, okay, I want to put a new object, and this new entry is put inside the database, synchronously, you will have a synchronous replication between this master and his 2 slaves, like that. And when the data, this information is well replicated on the 2 slaves, then you get the answer and the 200 return code. Okay, so this is, we just introduced 2 new services, the Conscience and the Zookeeper. The Conscience, just to know where is the best and the most available ROIX services to store my data, and the Zookeeper to do the master-slave mode for this database. So the Conscience is really good because what you have behind this Conscience is just, what is really important is when you want to store data, the Conscience makes sure that you will perform your request on the most available disk of the platform to do that. So it's good, obviously, for the performance. Sorry. It's also good when you have, for example, a hotspot on a specific disk. The score will go down dynamically, and you will go on other ROIX services to store your data. It's good also when you scale your platform. For example, let's say that I put a new ROIX services here because I have a new node or a new disk. As this new ROIX will not have any data stored, no request, or totally idle, his score will be obviously very high, let's say 100. So if I want to put a new data, dynamically again, the Meta2 will probably say this one is better. So when you scale the platform, you don't have to perform any rebalancing, painful rebalancing, because the new ROIX services that will be put inside the platform will have, by default, a better score because they are idle. So the new data will go to this new ROIX, and the platform will tend to become homogeneous by itself without launching this painful rebalancing. Okay, and also it's good, this Conscience system with the scoring, when you have an heterogeneous platform. You all know that when you are building this kind of storage infrastructure, it's not only for 6 months, but for years. So you know that the hardware you put at the very beginning of your platform here will not be the same for the new node. They will have more capacitive disk, better servers, better CPUs, and so on. So this Conscience system with the scoring system can manage easily and dynamically the heterogeneity of your platform easily. I mean, if you have a better node here with better disk, they will have a better score than the very old one. Any question before I'm starting the next? Well, I want to put a new bucket.
No, if we can go a little bit deeper on the Conscience technology. So you talked about the ROIX as you know, an important component to calculate the score. There are other components in the formula to calculate the score for each single service. Can you go a little bit deeper on this?
On the kind of metrics we are
Yes.
collecting and what? Yes. So a quick example. By default, again, it's configuration, so you can modify it. But by default, the ROIC score is calculated on the I/O idle of the disk, the capacity left in percentage, and the CPU left on the node. So you are multiplying these three metrics, and then you are doing a third square of this matrix, and then you have the score.
Okay.
This is how it works by default for the ROICs, but you have different metrics for Meta 2, Meta 1, Meta 0, like number of open database, and you can also give back, and you can put your own metrics if you want to say, okay, I want to know some information in my ROICs, like how many files stored, and I want to have this information for these specific services, and you want to put this specific information in the score, you can do it. It's just configuration. So you can modify the way you are computing the score and also the information and the metrics involved in the score.
Okay, so it's look like we have a lot of potential from
Exactly.
this, but do we have best practices
Yeah.
already in place?
Of course, we have default configuration and our own best practices. Usually, it's really useful when you have, for example, specific services or specific use case with specific workloads to tune the scoring system to have better performance and just to be sure that the scoring system is the best for your specific use case. It's not the same when you are building a mail platform and when you are building a backup platform. When you have a mail use case or a backup use case, it's definitely not the same workloads. So this is when you want to probably modify and tune the scoring system.
Okay,
Good. So
Very good.
to continue on the condition system, I said that the ROICs has every ROIC services in the platform have a score, but it's the same for all the services inside OpenIO. So the Meta 2 has also a score, let's say 70 for this one, 60 here, and let's say 80 here. So every services of the platform has a score, a quality score. So let's say that I want to put a new bucket, the bucket 2. So let's start here like that, and we go to the YoYo proxy. So here we are with the bucket 2 with a different name, because the name is hash coded. So let's say that this one will be 3244A, B3, and so on. So here we'll have a request to the Meta 0 saying that, okay, my name is, my first first digit is 324, and you will, like previously, you will get, again, in a free-time application mode that you can change, we'll have three different possibilities to three different Meta 1 services to get your information. And this is also because the scoring system is not only made when you write something. Let me introduce a new concept. Is the Meta 0 will give the three different possibilities here, but with their score. So let's say that we have this one involved. So we say, okay, so this is the IP port of this specific Meta 1, and the Meta 0 will give also the score with the IP port. So we go back here, and here through the Python API through the YoYo proxy will choose the most available Meta 1 services based on the score here to perform the request. So let's say that we will go to this one here, and this is a new bucket, so you don't have any entry here for, in the Meta 1 for this new bucket 2. We will do exactly the same as we did for the weeks. So the YoYo proxy will say to this Meta 1, okay, I want to create a new bucket with the name 324AB3 and so on. So the Meta 1 here will give back a list of Meta 2 services available to create this new bucket. Of course, based on the score. to make sure that we will choose the most available meta2 to perform this request. So this scoring system and this smart load balancing system is used not only to store the data, but also to create new entries in the infrastructure. What is good here is that when you scale the platform by adding new nodes, you will add new rake services, new meta2 services, new meta1 services, and new meta0 services, of course, with this new node. So when you scale the platform, not only you scale your capacity to store new data, but also you scale your capacity to create new entries in your table of indirection, what we call the directory. Meta0, meta1, meta2, we call it directory. So you also add new, you have more choices to put new entries in your directory. So let's go back here. So the meta1 will give a list of the three most available meta2 services in the platform. So let's say this one, and this one. So the proxy will say, okay, I want to create a new container, this one, 324 AB3, 324 AB3, and so on. And so the bucket will be created here. Again, remember, with the Zookeeper, we'll make synchronously, we'll do the replication of this new database. So here the meta2 will say, okay, I have created this new bucket, and I have also performed the replication of this database. So through the OYO proxy, we will go here to this meta1 saying, okay, I have put my new bucket, AB3 and so on, and we will put the 3 IP ports involved for this specific new bucket. And when everything is done, you have your acknowledgement here. Your bucket is newly created. So this is how it works. Something I didn't mention here, if you want, for example, create a new object in the bucket 2, let's say the object 3 in the bucket 2, so we'll do exactly the same. With the cache system, we'll go directly to this new bucket. One thing I didn't mention is when you put a new data here, a new object, let's say object 3, we are also storing here some technical metadata. This is where we are storing our metadata. Metadata. So some technical metadata like the checksum of the file, like the creation time of this object, and things like that. And this is also where you can put your own metadata. You know that using object storage solution, you can put object but also put metadata with the object, and this is where we will store the metadata. Why it's good? It's because if you create a lot of buckets, when you will scale your platform, you will scale your capacity in terms of data, metadata, and entries in the directory. So everything will be scaled at the same time. And based on the scoring system from the conscience, you will not have to do rebalancing of data or rebalancing of metadata or rebalancing of directory entries, because with the conscience, new entries, new metadata, or new data will be put on new nodes. Of course, because usually people ask me this question, we have some tools, if you need it, to move data. Usually it's used when you want to decommission a node, for example. So what will happen is, okay, I want to decommission this rakes. So you will go here, change the entries for this rakes, all the data stored here, and when this rakes will be totally emptied, you can remove it. So this is what we call mover, so you can also move data if you want to force it, but by default you don't have to do it.
What happens if I want to change the level of data protection?
Good question, Enrico. So something I didn't mention here is that with the scoring system here, so let's say for the rakes we have multiple rakes here with the score, and you have also some tag with the score, like the location, obviously. So okay, this rakes is on this disk is on this node, which is on this rack, which is on this data center, which is on this city, so this kind of information, the tag. So when you want, for example, to do a 3-time replication, you can say, okay, I want the 3 best rakes of the platform, but I want them in 3 different nodes, in 3 different racks, in 3 different data center, for example. So
this means that we support data locality and data distribution, several data centers, several racks, and so on.
Exactly. And so you have inside the conscience, you can configure a lot of different protection scheme based on the number of replication, the erasure coding scheme, or the geo distribution. So you can create a multiple configuration, and how it works is that by default you have a default configuration for the namespace. Let's say that every data will be replicated 3 times on 3 different data centers. But this kind of configuration, you can also override it at the container level. So you can have by default 3-time replication for the namespace, but inside this namespace, a specific bucket with, for example, an erasure coding scheme. And you can also override it at the object level. So something that I've never seen in production, but let's say that it's you can do it. It's to have by default 3-time replication, a specific bucket in an erasure coding scheme, and an object in this erasure coding scheme in a default namespace 3-time replication that will not be replicated at all. This is something that you can do.
Okay. So it's very flexible.
Very flexible. And to answer to your question, what will happen if you want to change the 3-time replication mode by default for the namespace? You can change it and say, okay, now for every new object, it will be erasure coding scheme. So you can change it, and you don't have to do anything. All the new objects will be created with this new protection scheme. So, I mean, you don't have to it will be on the fly. The new object will be created with this new protection scheme. The old object will be still available. You can still read it because you have all the information in this indirection table. So they will be still in the previous protection scheme. And the new ones will be in the new protection scheme. And if you want to put the old object in the new protection scheme, you just have to somehow replay it by saying, okay, we have tools to say, okay, object 3, you are in 3-time replication mode. You should be in the namespace default configuration, and you are not in the namespace default configuration. So our tool will say, okay, so I take this object and I modify it by making sure that this object will be now in the new protection scheme. So we have tools to do that.
It could be very impactful on the performance. Can you manage a little bit the level of
Of course. We are using this tool to move the data from a previous protection scheme to a new one. This is the same tool we use to repair data. For example, when you lose a disk, for example, you lose a disk, so you lose, for example, for this object, one of the possibility because the disk is has crashed. And we use the same, and this tool to say, okay, I want to repair data, or I want to move data from a previous protection scheme to another one. You have configuration to say, okay, I don't want to do more than 10 objects per second, or I don't want to do more than 10 megabytes of bandwidth per second with the tool. So you can also say, I want to do it quickly or slowly, or you can also make things like, okay, I want to do quickly, but only during night when there is no workload and no load on the platform.
Okay, so this introduces another interesting topic, I think, about data rebuilding. As you mentioned, this is the same tool. So what happens if I lose a node in the system? So because in many times with object stores, what happens is that data rebuilding starts immediately, and it impacts performance and traffic bandwidth and so on.
Sure. So this is a decision we made when we started to develop the OpenIO solution. OpenIO is a young company. It's getting older and older, but the technology has more than 10 years because we were using it and we developed it since 10 years. And during like 7 years, we were the only one to manage platform with our solution. So we made strong decision at the very beginning because we were the only one to manage failures, and so we make strong decision. And one of our decisions was, if you lose a disk and if you lose a node, you are in a in a system where the data is replicated, where the metadata is replicated, where everything is replicated. It's a non-SPOF architecture. So we make the decision to say, okay, if you lose a node, someone has to say, okay, I'm sure that we lose the node, because sometimes it happens that it's just your motherboard that is down, and you have to just change it, and it will take like 1 day, 24 hours to change it. And as the disk and the node are getting have more and more capacity, losing a node with like 100, 200, 300 terabytes of data could be a big impact if you automatically rebuild the data. So we made the decision, so okay, if you lose a node or this, someone has to say, okay, I'm sure that this disk, this node, is lost, definitive lost, so now I launch the rebuild system.
This is so quite interesting, because, okay, so you can wait before
Exactly.
starting again to rebuild data,
Sure.
but what happens if the nodes come back like 2 days later? Because there is something happening in the system. I can understand that you place data in other nodes, that's okay, but what happens with the stale data that you have in the node that may be updated or deleted or whatever?
Okay, so in that case, if your node is coming back in the system 2 days, 3 days, months later, if you have rebuilt the data, already rebuilt the data, so everything will be modified here in the indirections table. So all the data in the node, you can just throw it away, because the data is not referenced anymore in the infrastructure. If it's still referenced, your node, your disk will come back in the system and start to have again a score, because if the node of the disk disappeared, the constraints will put automatically a 0 score on this node, so no request anymore on it. And if it goes back to the production, it will get again a score and will be in the flow again. One thing I didn't say, but I want to say it. When I'm saying that we are not rebuilding automatically data, but someone has to say, okay, the data is it's sure that will not the data will not come back anymore in production. It's quite easily using some scripts to automatize it. I mean, by default, it's not done automatically, but if you want to do a script that if a score goes to 0, then I launch my rebuilding system, you can quite easily automate it.
Okay, and I have a question from Lorenzo that says, which is the purpose of three levels of indirection for metadata? Is it for performance, or it's more about scalability?
Okay, so why we decided to do that is because the thing was, when I go to the first level of indirection, I need an answer quickly. So I need to put only few data, not a lot of data, just to make sure I will have an answer very quickly. And then, when you go to the next level, you have more information, so it's bigger. But as you already did the first hop here, the data here where you have to get your data, it's small still, because it's already dispersed in all the platform. And again, when you want to get the information about the object, you have a lot of data here, but you already know that you have only to ask to these specific services. So the goal was really to say, okay, if you have billions of files, we can't make one database with billions of entries, because it will be very long to just get the information. So this is the way we made sure that you will get quickly the information, and you will have quickly your data. One last thing, very important for us, is that if you have one node with one disk, it's 3 hops to get the data. Meta 0, meta 1, meta 2, and then I get the data. If you have thousands of nodes, billions of files, millions of containers, still it's 3 hops, meta 0, meta 1, meta 2. This is something very important for us, is also this is why we designed it like that, is just to make sure that if it's a small infrastructure or very big infrastructure, it's still the same, and you will not see any performance issue if you scale with very high volume or a lot of data, a lot of objects. Whatever you are doing, it will be every time the same, 3 hops, and the same response time to get the data. If it's a Raspberry Pi, or if it's like 1,000 of petabytes platform.
I love Raspberry Pis.
So,
so the quick answer could be it's both for performance consistency
exactly,
as well as scalability.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
So as you can see, it's a very colorful and powerful solution. But yes, this is what it was really our goal at the very beginning, is just to make sure that, yes, for performance, for scalability, for everything, because the platform, the storage platform will scale for sure, just to make sure that you will not face any issue by scaling in terms of performance.
It's very nice.
Any other questions?
Not from the web, but
okay, I have maybe one last thing to.
Okay.
Because I know that you love Raspberry Pi, but also serverless computing, Enrico. So let me quickly introduce how it works. So this is a couple of services I didn't mention here. The first one is, I will put them here, is the reverse directory, reverse directory system. Our event system, Beanstalk Day. So it will be a quick introduction. Beanstalk. It's a quick introduction. Maybe we'll do another Oyo deep dive session to go deeper there, but I have to mention it. And we have also our account system, ACCT. So why I'm just explaining this is object for a bucket, whatever. It will basically we use it for the rig system. So every time you put a new data inside the rigs, it will create an event here, and we have the last one, which is called the Oyo event agent. Sorry, it's the whiteboard is almost full already. So it will create an event saying that, okay, I'm storing this part of this object. Then the Oyo event agent will pull all the events, and we say to the RDR, okay, this rakes is storing this object. So if you lose the rakes, you don't have to crawl all the platform to know what object and what chunk is missing. You just have to ask to the reverse directory system to rebuild your data. Of course, the reverse directory attached to this rakes is obviously not on the same node or on the same disk, because if it was on the same, if you lose the data and the way you can rebuild the data, it will be quite difficult. So the reverse directory for this rakes will be on a different data center, different node, different disk, whatever. The Beanstalk Day is also used when you put a new data, for example, in the bucket 2. The meta 2 will create an event in the Beanstalk Day, and we will fill the account system. This is where you will find information like, okay, this bucket is storing, I don't know, 10 objects. And it represents like 10 megabytes of data. So this is information. This is where are stored the information about a bucket, the number of objects, and so on and so on. And this is where.
Is this the same tool that we use to provide the chargeback, or is
exactly it's the same? So you make me explain everything, Enrico, and we have what we call our chargeback system. It's Oyo
CB.
Billing now.
Okay.
But let's say CB Oyo chargeback, and the Oyo chargeback system is getting information from the account to say, okay, this bucket is storing like 10 megabytes of data, so the bill for him will be whatever. And just to introduce it, but maybe we'll do a specific Oyo deep dive for that. This is also where you can start to do serverless computing, because you can say, okay, I have just put a new data, so you will have an event here, and this is where you can put your own script or our Grid for App system to say, okay, this is a new picture just stored inside this bucket and this rakes, and this is where you can start your script. We have many blog posts on our website, and you can go check them to say, okay, I want to analyze this picture using TensorFlow, for example. We have this kind of demos on our website. Using TensorFlow to say, okay, I want to analyze all the picture and to say, okay, this one is a picture with a car, this one is a picture with a volcano, for example, and then you can analyze it and with your script say, okay, I want to put a new metadata for this week and the category will be volcano, cars, and you can also build more complex workflow, like, okay, I want to put this new metadata for this object and put also this metadata in a indexing system like Elasticsearch or Apache Solar to say to be able at the end when you have billions of files to say, okay, give me all the objects where I can see a car inside this lake of pictures. So this is where is starting our idea about serverless computing, but maybe we'll do another one specifically on this topic.
Yeah, this is also, a very long session. It's 50 minutes long, so maybe
I'm very talkative.
No, but we are happy to have you talk about this technology, and but I think it's a lot of things to digest.
Yeah.
Today, maybe you can join the conversation on Twitter, or even send us messages, and we will organize other sessions in the future. Doing specific topics, or maybe talking more about use cases and how we can use our solution with OIOFS, which is also our file connector, and so on. So just let us know what you liked, what you didn't, so we will tune the session for the next time. I think that with this we can close this session.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody. We saw a lot of people watching this first session, and it will be available soon on YouTube also. And that's all. Bye bye.
Bye.